Well, it's a pleasure to be here again, and honestly, I know this is at least the third time, it may be the fourth time, because we've been running for 16 months. So it's good to be here. Many of you know, so I grew up in Gainesville, Georgia, and I feel like really, to be honest with you, most of my growing up occurred at the Gainesville airport. My parents ran the airport there and had flight instruction, flight charter, aircraft sales. My job from a very young age was to wash the planes. And the washing the top of the plane, not so bad. Underneath with the landing gear, not so good, especially in the winter. Believe it or not, even in the winter, I still have scars on my knuckles from washing landing gear. When you can't feel your fingers, it's hard to not, anyway. So that's what happens. But so the bad news is, or maybe not bad news is, from a child standpoint, bad news is it was a lot of hard work, and of course I appreciate that now in my adult life. The good news is I got to learn how to fly for free. In fact, I learned how to fly before I learned how to drive. And one of my flight instructors, now my dad died 21 years ago, and so when something like that happens, you really hold on to every single memory that you have. And so, but one of my flight instructors was my father. And as we would fly, my tendency was, and I think this do we have any pilots in the room by any chance? Good, then you'll know what I'm talking about. The tendency was for me to focus on the instruments in the panel instead of looking out of the plane. And so when it came to trying to figure out where the plane was supposed to go, I would look down, essentially a compass, we call it a heading indicator, and I would look down and I would be focused on making sure that the needle was right where it needed to be. And my dad said, no. Look out, pick a dot on the horizon, just fly to that dot. Got it. And then I would have situations where I would actually be gaining altitude and not realizing it, or losing altitude and not realizing it. No. Look at the horizon, look at the panel, just keep that distance the same. And that was huge for me. Not only was it very practical, but as I've gone back and thought about those conversations, it's been very applicable in so many avenues of my life. And I bring it up today because it's a reminder of the big picture, right? It's a reminder of not sitting being focused on the individual details, but being able to look out and understand the big picture. And for Republicans right now in this Secretary of State's race, the big picture is who's the best candidate to beat John Barrow.
Amen.
Absolutely. And so, as I mentioned, my name is David Belle. I'm a sixth-generation Georgian. I am a pro-life, free market Christian conservative. I'm a follower of Christ. I think that's important to say. Thank you. I am a 21-year husband to an amazing wife. I've got a 15-year-old, and God help me, a 13-year-old daughter. As I mentioned, I grew up in Gainesville, Georgia. It's the poultry capital of the world. But for the last 6-7 years, it has been my privilege and my pleasure to have been the mayor of Alpharetta, the technology city of the South. So as I mentioned, this campaign is about 16 months old now, and it was really born out of a conviction and a passion. The conviction is one I believe many of you share, and that is that the integrity of our state depends on the integrity of our elections. And we know that. And the passion is this, and it's really born out of my days as a mayor, but the passion is that I believe in creating opportunity through leadership for the community that I serve, and in this case, the community I'm looking to serve is the state of Georgia. And so with those two in mind, the conviction and the passion, everything that we've been running on, everything that we've been talking about falls on two very simple objectives. Defeat voter fraud, champion Georgia jobs. And so on defeating voter fraud, we've had some great work done, some by Secretary Kemp and Secretary Handel before him. Some great work has been done, but there's always more work to do when it comes to securing our elections. And so here's what I wanted to tell you about our Defeat Voter Fraud plan. The first is that we had a Proof of Citizenship Act that was passed in 2009 that was designed to do exactly what you think it would do, which is require someone prove that they are a U.S. citizen before they can vote in a Georgia election. However, with the Obama administration and the Obama Department of Justice, it has not yet been able to be implemented. And what that means is right now when you get a voter registration form, In block 5, if you check the box that says you have neither a driver's license number nor a social security number and turn that voter registration form in, you will be registered to vote whether you are a U.S. citizen or not. And that needs to stop. We need to make sure that only U.S. citizens can vote in Georgia elections. Now, we as Georgians, as Republicans, are proud and should be proud of the fact that we require a photo ID when you vote early and when you vote on election day. But when you vote with an absentee ballot, as you know, we don't need a photo ID. You don't need a witness. You don't need a notary. You don't need an excuse. All you need is somebody's stamp and somebody's address. And when we look across the state of Georgia and really across the country, the number one opportunity for voter fraud is through that absentee ballot. 500 absentee ballot applications showed up in the recent Atlanta mayor's election. I don't know all the details of that just yet, but something isn't right. When 500 applications show up at the Urban League, there's a problem. And we've got to figure out how to close those buttonholes, and that is imperative to make sure we require a photo ID even for the absentee ballot. And so our current voting machine system, it was initiated under Democrat Secretary of State Kathy Cox in 2002. It is running off software from Microsoft Office 2000. Here's the problem. When we vote, we have to, by faith, believe that our vote will be recorded just the way we made it. There's no way to do a true recount when it comes to that electronic vote. There's no way to do any type of post-election audit. And so the system that I will champion as your next Secretary of State is one essentially that after you show your photo ID, you would be given a piece of paper, you would submit it into that machine, and you would vote electronically just like you do now. But when you hit cast ballot, 2 things will happen. One is it'll make an electronic record just like it does now. The second thing is that it would print out your selections onto that piece of paper so that you, as the voter, can visually verify that your selections, the ones you made, are represented on that piece of paper. Once satisfied, you would submit that to a second machine, which would also do 2 things. It would make a scan, which would be a second electronic record, and it would also store that physical record, and in that way, each and every vote would have 2 electronic records and 1 paper record. In the event of a needed recount, you can do it. In the event of just good stewardship and a post-election audit, you can do it. And that's what makes that important, because it creates not only better voter security, but better voter confidence. And when you talk about what's a key instigator of voter suppression, the Democrats talk about that phrase all the time. Well, the best way to beat voter suppression is to defeat voter fraud. And that's what we need to be focused on. And so there you go. There's the defeat voter fraud side of the campaign that we've been running on. There's more to talk about, but we'll leave it there for now. And then there's this other side. And again, this is the side for me that comes out of passion for what I've done as a mayor. And it's championing Georgia jobs. And as you look around the state of Georgia, I'm just going to be candid with you. Metro Atlanta is doing great. And we often hear that the state of Georgia is the #1 state to do business in now for 5 years in a row. And we are and should be proud of that. But when you get outside Metro Atlanta, it's not really the same story. Yeah. And if you had been through the towns and communities that I've seen over this last 16-month period, your heart would break like mine breaks. Because at the end of the day, I'm still a mayor at heart, and when I see a community, I want to make it and see it thrive. But oftentimes what I find and see in some of these downtowns is you see plywood instead of glass. You hear about the textile industry that's no longer there. You hear about some other industry that's left, or the last large employer that's there, and how they're trying to hold on, or how their kids are graduating and moving to other opportunities. It all makes sense. And you wonder, what can we do about it? And so where I see is in Alpharetta, our biggest and best industry was technology. And we focused on trying to be the very best at it, because when I became mayor, it was just something we did. But now today, Alpharetta is a technology city of the South. And so when I look at Georgia, what Georgia does best, it's agriculture. It's the largest industry in the state still. It's $75 billion a year. It's technology and it's logistics. But when you look at agriculture, the average farmer is 60 years old, 5 years away from traditional retirement. And I believe one of the ways that we can turn the clock back in terms of the average age of our farmer, one of it is to look at ways to reduce duplicative regulation. We have environmental regulations at the federal level and at the state level. I think we need to take a hard look at how we reduce certainly the state level of those regulations. But the bigger issue of how I believe we can turn that clock back is start blending two things that Georgia does really well. I believe Georgia should be the #1 ag tech state in the country. And in fact, before I left as mayor, we put together the state's first Ag Tech Conference. Believe it or not, it's actually going to happen the week of the election in Alpharetta. But it's a start. It's a start as we blend two things that Georgia does well together. And I believe between precision ag, between biotech, I think there's a lot of opportunities to apply this technology to southeast, to southwest Georgia, to north Georgia, to find ways to roll back the average age of farming and improve our biggest and our best industry of agriculture. I also believe that the future of technology in Georgia is going to depend on our ability to attract new investment dollars, new venture capital dollars into the state of Georgia. But right now this is crazy. When it comes to dollars invested in new technology in the country, 75% of all dollars invested in technology go to 3 very blue states: California, Massachusetts, and New York. Georgia's share is just 2% of what California gets. And yet, we have a better standard of living, a lower cost of living, and a better quality of life. Y'all remember the Energy Secretary, Rick Perry, as the governor of Texas, would go to California and he'd sell Texas all day long successfully. We've got that same case to make, and I think we can do a lot better for Georgia. And so when I look at these things in terms of logistics and agriculture and technology, there is an opportunity for an organization, the Secretary of State's office, that touches every single business in the state of Georgia to be a leadership platform to grow and do what Georgia does best, and so that Georgia can be the best at it. But now let's look at it in that overarching question. Now, who's the best candidate to beat John Barrow? Now, some of you know exactly who knows who John Barrow is. Everybody know? Some of you don't. He's the former congressman from a district that stretched at one point from Athens all the way to Savannah. And the danger is that he has been painting himself as a conservative Democrat for a long period of time. Exactly. I don't know who said that, but you're right. Yet he voted with Obama 95% of the time. Now, his goal, his overarching mission is to actually challenge and take on redistricting in such a way that every state and every federal district line would be redrawn. Now, we talk about, is Georgia turning purple? Is it turning blue? The quickest way to turn Georgia blue is not to convince Republicans they should be Democrats. It's not even to convince independents that they should be Democrats. The quickest way to turn Georgia purple or blue is to redraw the lines. And what John Barrow wants to do is he wants to take the decision authority away from elected officials in terms of where those lines should be and put them in the hands of an appointed body, a group for which you or I will have no recourse with whatsoever. And here's what he knows too. He's an attorney. He gets it. When suits that are being filed against Georgia, like right now against Eric Holder, Obama's former attorney general, he's got 2 suits challenging 2 different districts right now, the lines. If he gets sued as a Secretary of State, he knows what I know. That when you take a complaint and you stick it in a drawer, 30 days later, you and I, as Georgians, will have conceded and admitted every allegation in that complaint. We can't afford to have someone at the gate as our Secretary of State who doesn't believe that citizens should have an impact as to where those district lines should be, who doesn't believe that we should have the lines that we currently have when it comes to our state and federal districts. And so my opponent, there's 2 of us left running. My opponent, over the past 6 years, has run now for 3 political offices. He's now spent over $1.5 million of his own money chasing this third office. And he's not running for Secretary of State because he wants to be Secretary of State. It's because it's what's next. And what is next after that? I don't know. I'm running for Secretary of State because I want to be your Secretary of State. And here's another difference between me and my opponent. If I could get all of you in a bus, it'd be a pretty big one, and I could drive you around Alpharetta, I could point to you. I could point to the downtown that we reinvented that's currently under construction, that's reinventing our city. I could point to the 85-acre tract of land that is now Avalon, one of the premier developments in the country. I could point to the incubator that we launched that now serves 50 startup technology companies. I could take you to the technical college and show you how that came about and how we were able to make that case and attract it there with some of our key technology business leaders. I could go to the conference center that we were able to find to publicly and privately finance so that we could find a way where the top Southeastern technology events happen in our city. And I could point to all these things and I could tell you how this almost didn't happen and how this person wanted it to be this way and this person thought this was a bad idea and this person thought it was a great idea. And that's what leadership is. The successes that we had grew Alpharetta to over 640 technology companies and over 100,000 jobs. If we took that same bus to show you what my opponent has accomplished, it would be a very short ride. He hasn't finished a job yet. He left early after city council. He left early after a state house seat 2 years ago. And now he's running for a third seat. If we're going to beat John Barrow, we're going to have someone who has a record to point to, who has someone who understands how you lead beyond the authority and the resources of your office. If we're going to beat John Barrow, we have to have someone who understands the legal consequences to what someone in that position can do when they're not for what Georgia needs and for what and who Georgia is. And so if anything here has resonated with you today, I need your help. Not only do I need your vote, I need you to endorse me either through your Facebook page, through your email. I endorse David Belle is what I need from you. That's the way, I think that's my music. That's the help that I need from you today. David Belle, Republican for Secretary of State. Any questions?
Raise your hand.
Yes, sir.
How as Secretary of State are you going to influence the development of tech, agro-tech?
The question was, how, as Secretary of State, can I lead ag tech? Really, the same way I did as mayor. The mayor's role, it's just like Secretary of State in this respect. It is a great title that people presume has a lot of authority, and it doesn't. So as mayor of Alpharetta, what I recognized real quickly is all the great ideas I had in my head when I ran for mayor, that there was really actually no way to do them unless I was able to cast a vision and get people behind that. That Ag Tech conference that's going to be happening later on this month, it wasn't because I could sit and mayor and decree it and make it so. I went and I talked with Gary Black in the Department of Agriculture. I went and met with many technology companies that have formats in the agricultural field. And we were able to put that together with multiple public and private entities. And so when it comes to doing that same thing statewide, I believe it absolutely can be done. When I was a council member, I had the same vision and goals that I did as mayor. The problem is that when I would call a CEO of a technology company and say, hey, I've got this great idea for your industry in our city, they were polite. But when I was mayor and I said, look, I've got this great opportunity for your industry and for our city, will you have lunch with me? They would, absolutely. And I believe that same level of influence can happen at the state level, not because I have the authority or the resources to do it, but because I can put together a plan in cooperation with people across the state to make a better Georgian for every Georgia everywhere. So.
In your pursuit of creating jobs in Georgia, are you considering at all the number of undocumented workers that are being hired by companies that claim that they can't afford to pay any more than what they're paying.
And I don't have an answer to you on the job side of it. Certainly on the election side, I think we can certainly fight that battle. But on what I'm talking about in terms of growing our industries, I don't think I'm going to have much of an avenue for that in terms of undocumented workers or illegal aliens on that front. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I appreciate you bringing up redistricting because the shortest pencil is longer than the longest memory. If anybody in this room remembers 2010, when most of Fayette County had been redistricted to the 13th, into David Scott's 13th district, and it was the Tea Party who held an impromptu urgent meeting at Whitewater Creek, and we were told, everyone was told to go home and call your neighbor. Tell them to get on the phone and call Governor Hill, who held a special session in I guess it was 2011. Yeah, because the census was in 2010. This was 2011. Most of our county had been redistricted to 13th district. He just brought that up. That is major, and our next governor will also be signing off on this redistricting. The census will be in 2020, and the redistricting will be in 2021. But so thank you for doing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Yes, sir.
Those states you named a while ago, those 3 states I think it was, well, the Republicans here in the state of Georgia are trying to create the same morals, values, and all the other things that these other companies are leaving those states for. So we got a problem there with them trying to change this state, match them other states.
Well, I certainly wouldn't be an advocate of trying to match those states in any way, but I would definitely say for any business, Georgia's a better state than California, Massachusetts, or New York, and that's the case we should make.
Amen.
All right. Fantastic. Thank y'all so much.